What's up, guys? It's Mr. Bringle, and today we're going to be going over the velocity versus time graphs concept builder on physicsclassroom.com. You will be doing all three levels. However, I'm going to skip the apprentice level because we'll cover anything that we would be doing in that level in the master and wizard levels. So we'll start here with the wizard or the master level. And it says identify any object that is getting faster or speeding up. So notice that all of these are velocity versus time graphs. That's what it's going to be. So that's important because obviously if you kind of have a position versus time graph in your head, you can pick some wrong answers here. So this one says identify any object that is getting faster or speeding up. So what we're going to be looking for here is we're going to be looking for a velocity that starts at 0 meters per second and then increases. Okay, so it goes to some non-zero number. Now remember that the positive and negative signs only tell us direction. It has nothing to do with whether it's increasing or decreasing speed in terms of the slope of the line or whether it's on the negative side, right? So people will think, oh, this one's decreasing speed because the slope, it's going down, or it's a negative number, so it's decreasing. But this one is in fact increasing its speed because it starts at 0 meters per second, and then the number gets larger as you go more and more negative, right? So the magnitude of the velocity increases. And the same thing with this one here, which I think would be a commonly correctly picked answer. And then another misconception would be to pick this one because the slope of this line is positive. That only tells us that it is a positive acceleration, but this object ends its velocity at 0 meters per second. So this is not a correct answer. It starts at some non-zero number, it ends at 0, therefore it is slowing down. Okay, this one says identify any object that is moving in the positive direction with a constant velocity. So constant velocity on a velocity versus time graph, we're going to be looking for a horizontal line, a flat line, and that's going to be this one right here. So kind of what you're looking for here is imagine that there are numbers on this y-axis, right? Let's say there's 1, 2. This would indicate that the object's velocity is 2 meters per second the entire time. It doesn't change. So that would be constant velocity. Whereas the graphs on either side here are increasing along the y-axis. So it does indicate that the velocity is changing. Okay, this one says identify any object that's moving with a constant velocity. So this one doesn't specify positive or negative. We're simply looking for a horizontal line, which we just talked about. Okay, this one says identify any object that is changing directions. So for this one, remember that what we just mentioned, that the positive and negative signs tell us direction. Okay, so we are looking for a line that is in both the positive side and then eventually goes to the negative side, indicating that it has changed directions. That's going to be this one in the middle right here. I think the most commonly picked wrong answer would be this one on the right side right here. This one is not correct because the velocity is positive every single point on this line. If you trace it over to the y-axis, it's going to be a positive number, right? So it never goes into the negative side, never changes direction. It'll be picked because people just want to look at the shape of the line and say, oh, well, the line changed directions, right? But that does not mean that the object changed directions. Okay, this one says identify any object that is moving in the negative direction with a constant velocity. So all three of these are moving in the negative direction. However, the middle and the right ones are changing velocity because the line is moving down along the y-axis here. And the one on the far left is the only one that has a constant negative velocity. It stays the same the whole time. Okay, this one says identify any object that is getting slower or slowing down. So for this one, what we're looking for is that the object starts with some non-zero velocity and then it ends at 0 velocity. So I think that if you're a lot of people, again, misconception wise, will just look at the shape of the graph and they'll pick these two because they have negative slopes, and people just assume that means slowing down. The one on the left here is incorrect because the object starts at zero velocity, 0 meters per second, and then it increases its velocity just moving in the negative direction. So this one is wrong. The one on the far right is correct because it does start at a positive velocity and then the line ends at 0 meters per second. So that one is correct. We also need to choose the middle one because the middle one is the exact opposite. It's moving in the opposite direction, but it's doing the exact same thing. It starts with some non-zero velocity, in this case negative, and then it slows down and ends up at 0 meters per second along our y-axis here. This one says identify any object that is changing its velocity or accelerating. So we talked about constant velocity being a flat horizontal line, so this will clearly not be the right answer. These two graphs will be correct answers because the line is moving up along the y-axis on both examples there. So the velocity is changing. Okay, this one says identify any object that is stationary or not moving. Well, if an object's not moving, that means it has 0 velocity. So we would look for the answer that has the red line on 0 meters per second. This has a constant positive velocity. This object is accelerating on the right side. It's increasing its velocity over time. All right, there's our master trophy. We've completed it. We'll go into the wizard level. This one, I'll just do a couple examples here, maybe 3 or 4 examples, and let you do the rest on your own. This one's just adding in a fourth answer choice. So it says identify any object that's moving in the positive direction and speeding up. Okay, so we've got to be careful here. We can immediately eliminate this answer and this answer because both of these objects are moving in the negative direction. Okay, so we can eliminate those. So now we need to choose between these two answers. And the first one is moving in the positive direction, and it's also speeding up because it starts at 0 meters per second and its velocity increases over time. The one in the bottom is actually doing the same thing. It starts at 0 meters per second. It increases its velocity over time. The difference between these two is that the top one has a constant acceleration because the slope of this graph represents acceleration. The bottom graph does not have a constant acceleration, but it doesn't change in the fact that it's still speeding up. This one says identify an object that's changing directions. We've already gone through one like this. We're looking for the one that goes from the positive side to the negative side of the graph to indicate a change of direction. We are ignoring the one on the far right side over here because we are not going to look at the shape of the line and have that common misconception that one is changing direction. We're going to think about this in terms of positive sign means positive direction, negative sign means negative direction, so it has to be on both sides of that graph. This one says identify any object that's getting faster or speeding up. So we are looking for one that starts at 0 meters per second and increases its velocity, either goes up along the y-axis and the positive side or down along the y-axis and the negative side, which would be these two here. Again, that common misconception is that the negative slope means slowing down, or that the positive slope over here on this one means speeding up, but this one ends at 0 meters per second, so it must be slowing down. All right, this one says identify any object that's moving in the positive direction and slowing down. So we can immediately eliminate this answer right here because this answer is moving in the negative direction the entire time. We're looking for one that's moving in the positive direction and slowing down. So we have to choose between these 3 answers right here. Let's start on the left side. This object starts with a flat slope. Okay, so and then it goes to having some slope. So if you are thinking about position versus time graphs, you might be thinking, ooh, that object is speeding up. But look at where the velocity ends. The velocity ends at 0. So this object is slowing down. It's just not constant acceleration. Okay. And again, this top right answer over here, a common misconception would be to say, oh, this one is slowing down because the shape of the graph, this would mirror an object slowing down on a position versus time graph. That's why these are on here. This object actually starts at 0 meters per second, and then it increases its velocity over time. It's moving up along the y-axis. So this object is actually speeding up. We will not include that answer. The other correct answer would be bottom right, which shows the object starting at a positive velocity, and then it decreases until it hits 0 meters per second along the y-axis here. So those are a little tricky. I'll go ahead and do this one as well, since these are a little bit more tricky here. Identify any object that's moving in the negative direction and speeding up. Okay, so all 4 of these objects are moving in the negative direction. We have to identify the ones that are speeding up. This top left one here starts at 0 meters per second, and it does increase its velocity. It's going down along the y-axis, so this number is getting larger here. So this one is speeding up. You can say the same thing about the bottom left one. It starts at 0 meters per second, and the number gets larger. Now, the 2 on the right side are both slowing down because they start at some non-zero number and then they end at 0 meters per second. Okay, so these 2 objects must be slowing down. Okay, this one says identify the objects that are moving in the negative direction and slowing down. So this top left one here starts at some non-zero number, and then it moves back along the y-axis to 0 meters per second. So this object is slowing down. This one down here is moving in the positive direction, so we'll eliminate that one. This one over here is starting at 0 meters per second and then moving to a non-zero number. So this one's speeding up, so that's incorrect. And then this answer in the bottom right is also speeding up because it starts at 0 meters per second. It moves to a non-zero number along the y-axis. So we actually only have 1 correct answer for this one. At this point, I'll just go ahead and finish out the wizard level. Which ones are slowing down? So we're going to choose these 2 answers because the object starts at a non-zero number, and then it ends at 0 meters per second along the y-axis here. The third option starts at 0 meters per second and goes to a non-zero number, so it is speeding up. And our final question here, it says, which one or which of these are changing velocity and accelerating? So the one on the far left is constant velocity. The middle and the right are changing velocity because they are increasing their value along the y-axis. All right, so that is your velocity versus time graphs concept builder. Again, you're going to be doing the entire thing, but the apprentice level is covered within the master and wizard levels. So let me know if you have any questions.